The following is a presentation of iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations on LSRTV, the voice of sim racing.
Live tonight from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. LSRTV happy to be with you as we say good evening sim racing fans and welcome to the Indianapolis 250 presented by the Drive for Suicide Prevention. Happy to be with you tonight at LSRTV. Myself, Evan Pizzoco, joined by Chris Murdoch in the LSRTV booth downstairs. The lovely and talented Cisco Scaramuza pushing the buttons and bringing us to you this evening. Chris, we were just talking before we started that we have been itching for some IndyCar action here on LSRTV, and we have some from the world's most infamous racetrack. We are at the Brickyard tonight for 100 laps of IndyCar action and could not be more excited to get this thing underway. And something else that we're going to be talking about as the night goes on is obviously how you're going to navigate through these 100 laps. Going to be totaling 250 miles in tonight's Indy 250, and this is completely different to any of the bumper action and the closed wheel stuff that NASCAR and all of that. Completely different when you talk about these Indy cars. The, I think, most important thing to discuss ahead of time is the drivers hit the track and get set for the qualifying session. As always, as it is in Indy cars at Indianapolis, it is a 4-lap qualifying session. It is going to be the best, though, of those 4 laps to set pole time. But the biggest thing, and I think the biggest worry, is restarts, Chris, but most importantly, the initial start of this race. With over 20 drivers on track, going to be double file for the first time across the yard of bricks to turn number 1. You just want to survive. You want to keep your car in one piece, and that's not always guaranteed because any sort of small mistake in these race cars can end badly.
Definitely, Evan, and as we get set to start off here and we're watching qualifying, there's a lot of fast drivers and a lot of names I recognize from IndyCar series that I run in my personal time. But yeah, like you mentioned, we just want to survive. Getting off down into turn 1 is going to be probably the trickiest part of this start because you're going to have people going maybe 3-4 wide down the front straightaways because these cars can fit those gaps, and you're going to have to watch for everything, the push going into the corners with the air. So a lot of factors go into starting this race, and like you mentioned, people just want to get through it.
Just about 2 minutes left in this qualifying session. Let's talk about what we saw a little bit earlier on in practice. You talk about some of those familiar names. Joe Branch is, in fact, one of the first names that popped and caught my eye when we jumped into the session here. He was the best in practice. Best time was a 38.7. The slowest time was a 40.2, so about a second and a half between the best and the worst, that I'm expecting the times to be that much tighter when it comes to the qualifying session as it slowly starts to run down. But as noted at the top, absolutely love having Indy cars here on LSRTV, and so happy that you're with us for tonight's Indianapolis 250. There is basically one lane on this racetrack, and that is on the inside. If you can keep the foot down, you're going to be successful. You have to hope that that car can cooperate as the fuel begins to lighten up and the car loses some weight and gets a little bit more tricky into the corners on worn tires and such. 2x2 not preferred in the center of the turns. And for those tuning in who may have watched a little bit earlier on in this week, the iRacing Indy 500, or even if you competed in the iRacing Indy 500, any of those splits over this past weekend, then you are going to be very familiar with how these cars drive. But if you've never driven an Indy car at Indianapolis, Chris, on the sim, and I'm not talking going out there by yourself and doing a couple of laps with maybe a group of 3 or 4 cars, but when you're out there with 20 plus drivers up to speed, full speed, 235 miles an hour. It is so extremely treacherous. any sort of small touch can send you and a handful of drivers into the fence. So while the racing's going to be intense, the draft is going to be strong all night, which can allow for great passing down the back and, of course, down the front. Make some tight, interesting calls down into quarter number 1. But I think that we are going to see a definite group of drivers, a faction, if you will, that are just trying to take it easy, conserve the cars. A lot can happen in 100 laps, and you don't want to wreck out in the first 99.
Definitely do not want to wreck out in the first laps, or even wreck out at all. You know, you mentioned how treacherous this track is. These drivers are going to have to keep such a level head going down into this race, Evan, because it's going to take a lot of concentration to keep that wheel smooth and keep the inputs nice. You mentioned going off into the corners. The low line is going to be preferred, but not too low. If you look at these corners, you'll see there's curbing on the bottom there, Evan, and you don't want to catch those, or you'll find yourself right on the outside wall, or maybe up into other cars. So a lot of things to pay attention to tonight, but Indy definitely where we want to be.
Cars are headed to the grid, so let's take this opportunity and head trackside. We'll take a look at tonight's LSRTV starting grid from Speedway, Indiana. Pole position going to go to the driver who was best in practice, a 38.611 for the 28 Joe Branch. Going to put him on pole position for this one. He will be joined on the front row by the 78 of Christian Steele. Bradley Walters and Tim Doyle going to make up row number 2. They start in 3rd and 4th respectively, and Christopher, great improvement over a P21 in practice. He'll roll from top 5.
The sixth position goes to Brian Barney in that 16. Andrew Banfield is going to be 7th. Nicholas Schmieg is going to be 8th. 9th belongs to Anthony Garcia, and 10th, Lynn Kinoli.
We've also got the number 88 of William Kruska, who will start this race at 11th position alongside with Jason Brizik. They make up row number 6. Both of those drivers top 10 at a practice session, outside of the top 10 in qualifying. Jared Turnbull going to be given the unlucky number 13 starting position tonight behind the wheel of his number 30 Bashid. Chad Frankenfield behind him drops 11 spots and will start from 14th position. First driver inside to row number 8. Going to be the 02 of Michael Redding in 15th.
16th belongs to Jason Burgess. David Levine is going to be 17th. 18th belongs to Kevin Finn. 19th, Andrew Cardinal. And rounding out your top 20 is Richard Hines.
Field begins to roll down to quarter number 1. Final couple of qualifiers in tonight's Indianapolis 250. Corey Eldred will start in 21st with Ray Sanders 22nd and Johnny Thomas in 23rd. Those are the final drivers to take a time in qualifying. 2 provisionals going to be optioned out. Looks like the 24 of Michael Chin has taken his and will roll from the number 24th position. There is also an additional spot up for grabs to Rory Collins, who is out of Indiana, who is being optioned to start in 25th position. He was 19th earlier in practice. However, that car is not on the grid at the moment. I noted we may see factions of drivers hanging back. I would not be surprised if he is just waiting simply to start this race from the pit lane, because that 2x2 to quarter 1 for the first time is going to be wild. So as the field paces down the back straightaway behind the iRacing.com official pace car, let's talk about this Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Chris, the Brickyard, 2.5 miles in distance, and asphalt and brick surface across the start finish line. 4 turns banked at 9.2 degrees. They all drive just a little bit different from each other, and it is not as surefire as just keeping the foot down. If you got a car that can do it, don't lift the right foot. You've got a good chance at winning this race. If you cannot do that, though, you're going to have a handful for the course of the night.
You really are, Evan. It's going to be weird to see all these drivers. You know, a lot of drivers I recognize, a lot of drivers I don't, and I'm looking for surprises here tonight. Indy can always produce surprises. You know, we don't get to actually kiss the bricks at the end of this race, but I wouldn't be surprised if some drivers have some milk on standby if they do get in victory circle.
The pace cars get it off and away, and we're so happy that you're with us tonight on LSRTV. Field going to be in the hands of Joe Branch as they come into the stadium at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. As they approach the Yard of Bricks, we get set to go green flag racing in the Indianapolis 250, presented by the Drive for Suicide Prevention, and we are underway through 1 and 2. First time.
Everybody seems to be making their way to the bottom, which is where you want to be. No fights going on. Everybody trying to get down to that bottom line, not really push anything coming off of turn 2. Everything seems to be single files. We got 3 wide for the lead already going off into turn 3. Joe Branch is going to be on that high side. He's going to surrender. Bradley Walters going to be back there. Christian Steele and Tim Doyle is going to be up there. They're all jockeying for that lead position here on lap 1.
And he may have an opportunity to lead after the first 2.5 miles. Don't think so quickly. Christian Steele going to go back to the inside. They race to the start-finish line. Not going to get it inside. Tim Doyle leads lap number 1. But Steele preferred positioning into quarter 1. And apparently not a lot of marbles up at the outside because it looked like Doyle pretty much kept that 11 flat on that outside lane. He'll now battle back for the race lead. A much quicker run at a turn number 2 than what Steele had on him at a turn number 4. Third lead change in the first 1.5 laps.
It's definitely a lot more hectic than I thought it would be at the start here, Evan. I thought as you mentioned, people would be riding around, but these top 3 are all over the place. You can't count out Joe Branch, because if Joe Branch gets one great run down one of these straightaways, he can set up these drivers as Christian Steele looks back down the inside of Tim Doyle going into the corner. He's going to be there as Tim Doyle gets a little bit higher than you want to be at this track, and he's still going to stay up there, not going to have the preferred position. That's going to allow Joe Branch to get caught back up there and even bring Bradley Walters into the picture now going down the back straightaway.
And you can see the 78 is Steele up at the outside as these drivers look to line up on the bottom. And again, not completely surprised that Steele is able to run that top lane early in a run. They haven't really rubbered in the track all that much. Did have a 30-minute practice session and obviously that 4-lap qualifier for this race. But there's not a lot of marbles up there. And especially when you're up at the front in relative clean air, the car can stick to the racetrack a little bit better. You're not seeing this kind of passing going on as frequently throughout the field because when you're in line and you have that big hole punched into the air for the guys in front of you. The draft is good. It makes you quick. It gets you up to 235 plus miles an hour. The problem is there's no downforce on that car, and it cannot stick into the corner, and that's where you're going to see guys lifting. But so far up front, an expo of fantastic. Back to 4th race lead. Doyle, race leader last time by the Art of Bricks, lost the race lead at a 2, took it back into quarter number 3, and now we'll see if Steele can get an opportunity to lead a lap back to the inside as they constantly continue to swap out the race lead as Joe Branch and Bradley Walters just kind of sit back 3rd and 4th right on him, but not give it up. Still side by side for the race lead back to quarter 2.
And we have about a 5-car tiny little breakaway. And as I say that, we start to see a little bit more drivers come up. That's the 16 of Brian Barney coming up here as they're all battling for the lead. And then you see, Joe Branch and company who are just sitting back and watching it, trying not to push too much as now he's getting pressured on the inside from Bradley Walters. Bradley Walters gets a little bit too low going down in there, going into turns number 1. He loses a lot of time. Now he's going to fall back a few positions and drop in line behind Chris Stouffer. Now Joe Branch is going to be looking to the inside of Christian Steele going off in the turn 1. Maybe try to get a twofer as he gets up on Tim Doyle's inside, driving through that corner. Not going to quite get there just yet. Coming off of turn 2, still side by side now. Clear Tim Doyle, going to be able to hold him off on the high side.
Want to give a shout to a couple of battles in the middle of the pack. How about the 33 of it's Andy Banfield, but it's Jared Turnbull going to the inside, and he's got company coming with the William Kruska to the inside, side by side in quarter 3. But again, the 33 still good. 6 laps into the run to keep it flat on that second lane of the racetrack down in 3 and 4, and what looked like nearly a surefire setup for Kruska to get a position does not happen, and Turnbull, who's going to be able to pick up the number 9 spot, hangs on with Banfield fighting behind him. So there are battles like what we're seeing up front going on throughout the pack. You'll see somebody jump at a line. I bet you every single time we come at a turn 2 and every single time we come at a turn 4. That's just the way that these cars race it, as noted, especially early on in a run. But hard to take your attention off of the guys up front as we've got some 3-wide mid-pack going into quarter 3. We saw that for the race lead on the opening lap. We just saw it for 13th on lap 7.
It's always a lot of fun racing here in Indianapolis. I didn't expect it this early, but talking about the high side there, Evan, we're seeing a lot of drivers stay up there on the high side and maybe able to make it work going through the corners of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. But you get 15, 20 laps in, you won't be seeing that anymore, Evan. You'll see people trying to set up passes off of corner 2 all the way down the backstretch going into turn 3, as we have a move for turn 3 pass right here with Joe Branch on the inside of Tim Doyle. He's going to get that position. We're having a lot of lead changes here early on, Evan, and I don't expect any of it to let up.
And the guys up front are actually starting to break away a little bit, unlike what we saw over this weekend in the 101st running of the Indianapolis 500, where the field broke out into one long single file line, and you could see them all snake for the outside of quarter number 4 down to the inside fence of the front straightaway, trying to block the inside on the pass, and then they would swing back wide off to quarter 1. We are seeing groups form up. This lead pack is about 6 or 7 cars deep as we go side by side for the race lead once again. Branch on the inside, and again it was Christian Steele battling with Tim Doyle for the opening couple of laps. Joe Branch sat back in third and just kind of watched all of it after he was passed 3 wide on the opening lap, and now he's taking part. But you've got a lead pack of 8 cars, you've got a secondary pack of about 5 cars. You can see that every single time we come down the straightaways, but it means that the guys up front are not going to be able to get away from each other. These top 7, Doyle, Branch, Steele, Stouffer, Walters, Barney, and Schmieg, they are going to be all over each other for the better part of this run. It's actually Barney and Schmieg had some sort of an issue at the last lap, about 4/10 slower than the guys in front of them, and they're actually going to lose contact. So 5 drivers lead a pack as their battle for the race lead continues.
And you gotta wonder strategy, Evan. I know it's a little bit early to start talking about it, but we saw Christian Steele up there with Joe Branch and Tim Doyle battling for the lead, but now you see him sitting back, not really pushing the issue, maybe trying to save just a little bit of fuel under this run. We're just now 10 laps in, and these 10 laps have flown by for me, Evan. So if it's anything like these drivers are thinking, they're gonna have to start buckling down, start riding, and try to save fuel and make it to that first pit stop, because it's all gonna come up on them really, really fast as a yellow flag comes out. So everything I just said means nothing.
First caution on the racetrack at lap number 11, and it's big problems in corner 1. Ray Sanders is up and on his lid. That car is not going to come back to a rest on all 4 Firestones, and that is big trouble down in quarter number 1. So 11 laps of green flag action, but it all went downhill pretty quickly. We'll take a second look at the LSRTV replay, and it was a little bit too much to handle. I think the problems started in front of these guys, though. Really 2 separate accidents. Looks like we were 3 wide to corner 1, and the 15, Chad Frankenfield in the middle, drifted up. Looks like he tagged Jason Burgess on the outside. Those drivers pinballed, and then when Frankenfield ended up at a fence by himself, it could have been limited to a 1-car accident, but 2 drivers wrecked trying to get through that. And that's where the problem was. It looked like the 29 of Andrew Cardinal was checking up for the wreck, and the 86 behind him did not see that happening, and he got taken out for the back end by Sanders.
And you have to have such good reaction time in these cars, because things do happen really, really fast here, Evan. You're going speeds up of 230 miles an hour down the straightaway and going into these corners. So you always got to pay attention, and if anything happens right in front of you, just kiss your butt and hold on, because you're not really going to have that much time to react. And that's what we saw there. Somebody just not seeing the wreck, and just it happens. And I feel like that's going to be most of our issues here tonight, Evan, is just reaction time issues, because everybody's still going to get used to. There are a few drivers in here that run IndyCar on a regular basis, but for those drivers that are stepping in and trying to figure it out for the first time, that's going to be a challenge that they're going to be faced with here tonight.
So the pit lane going to be open for the first time tonight, and our race leaders are headed down for stops. Tim Doyle going to be the first driver in. He's going to head down to the 4th to last stall. Joe Branch, though, who started on pole, runs in second driver down to the pit lane, has pit stall number 1. We will see if that will be of enough benefit to him to get himself back out and in front of this field. Also want to note that there are no quick repairs. You got damage, you got to sit down pit road and fix it. So all those drivers involved in the accident, especially those who got heavy contact into the turn water barrier, they are out of this race. Race on for the pit lane, a good one. Joe Branch put up a fight, but Tim Doyle not going to be denied. First driver in is the first driver off. Nicholas Schmig in a 99 machine, however, decided not to come down to the pit lane after running in 6th position, and at the moment, he rides behind the pace car as your race leader.
And I don't know if that's such a good idea to stay out. We might see him duck around and come back in during this lap once he realizes that everybody basically pit behind him. But it's always good to try strategies out here early. We're only on lap 13 of 100, Evan, so it's going to be interesting to see what that 99 does, because not very many people stay out on the first pit stops. You'll see people come down, make adjustments to their car, and just try to change something, and it's really weird to see somebody stay out this early.
And something else that we need to note is it's not like he can stay out and have an opportunity to come back down to the pit lane. Lights are out on top of the iRacing.com official pace car, so we are going to back rate from Indianapolis. We stressed how critical the start of this race was and would have liked to get a little bit more than 11 laps of the opening stint, sure, but we survived corner 1. That was the biggest thing, that the 2-wide green flag in this race. 3 starts, single file. Going to be a little bit more real estate. Keep an eye on those guys, though, trying to jump at a line before the start-finish line to get a position on track. The pace car down and away. They await the green flag to drop from the flag stand. Green flag flies. We go back underway. The top driver, single file, double wide now for the number 2 spot. Sneaking topside is Tim Doyle. Not going to work, though. A drop back to 3rd. No contest for the race lead.
Yeah, and we're starting to see that track rubber in just a little bit. 10 laps does a lot here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and we saw Tim Doyle try to get up there on the high side as the 99's battling, blocking all the way down, trying to go to that defensive line down the back straightaway. As now Tim Doyle's going to be on the outside again, going through turns 3 and 4. It's not going to work again. We're seeing the track come into play. He's able to hang out there just a little bit, Evan, but not really get the pass and get the momentum to go by. Still going to be side by side going down the front straightaway. Now we got Joe Branch trying to pass Jared Turnbull going down the straightaway. So 2 by 2 by 2 on this first lap back green.
And look at the pass for the race lead on the outside of the racetrack. Tim Doyle, he got it. You saw the big block, although not supposed to block at IndyCar, so we'll call it a defensive maneuver at a turn number 2 the last time by Schmig to block the inside. Well, the 11 went topside, and the grip has been out there, so Doyle was able to pass him up. But now the momentum back in favor of the 99. He got on the curb sideways in turn 3. Cost him about 15 miles an hour. Good save. Could have been a lot worse, but it is going to lose Schmig the race lead. Now let's see if they split him 3 wide. A lot of traffic coming up the back end with Bradley Walters, Christian Steele, and Chris Stouffer inside of the top 8.
Yeah, they're all trying to move it around them as they're all trying to sort themselves out at the same time. Now Joe Branch moves up in that 2nd spot off of that mess up from Nicholas Schmid. So we saw Branch and Doyle going at it before, and it doesn't look like they're going to stop now. 2 by 2 going down into turn 3. Joe Branch going to take the lead from Tim Doyle coming through turns 3 and 4. Coming off of 4, Tim Doyle's not going to be there to make another challenge move, but I don't think he's going to sit there and leave it. He's going to drop down the inside once again. These two are going at it here early on in this race.
And sometimes in these races, again, I noted that there's going to be groups of people who don't want to partake in this side-by-side action. You see a little bit of a bobble like we saw a couple of laps ago. A driver gets down on that curb at the inside of the racetrack, and it does not end very well. But sometimes making these passes helps you save fuel. You don't always want to be running in a race lead. You ride behind somebody, you can let off the gas just a little bit, although these guys appear to be pedal to the metal, just having some fun with it at lap number 17 of 100. But you see that white line that 99 is cheating on. You can cheat that white line. Absolutely. In fact, I'd be more surprised if you didn't. He is very aggressive, though. You got underneath that white line, maybe a foot or so of asphalt still, and then below that, it's a lighter color. That's the curbing that was scanned onto the iRacing service from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. You can't get on that. If you hit that or you hit the grass that comes before or after it, it's not going to end very well for you. But if you can cheat the proper amount and split the difference between that white line and the curbing, you're almost going to help yourself hook up through the corner. Just don't get a little bit too friendly with it. Schmeeks had a couple of close calls as he continues to ride third.
And that's what I was mentioning at the start of this broadcast. With that curbing, you always got to be aware of your surroundings, and especially going into the corners as he almost cuts the curbing once again, and he's just not using the track effectively. You can, like you mentioned, you can cheat that white line, and it's the fastest way around here because it helps that car turn, especially when it's tied up with all this fuel, and it's just a difficult line to follow, as we got Tim Doyle in the lead. Joe Branch and Nicholas Schmieg, who was falling off from that curbing, is able to keep up with these top three.
Yeah, and we went on board, with the 99 there, and he's just kind of watching these guys. I think he could force the issue if he wanted to, maybe make it a 3 wide as the guys up front fight, but I think for the moment he's content in third, because the opening stint of this race, the top 5 drivers pulled away, and now it looks like the top 3 have some space. Good battle for 4th, side by side. Christopher, Christian Steele, they do battle. Bradley Walters, Jared Turnbull are in that pack as well. That's about a 4-car breakaway. The likes of Anthony Garcia, William Kruska, and even Jason Brizik through 10th position are still there as well. But 4th position is 1.5 seconds off of these top 3. So I think that Schmid can comfortably let off for the gas, hang back in 3rd, and not be at risk of having somebody be able to catch his wake and draft up to him and then inserting themselves into this battle. So I think the 99's in a pretty comfortable position.
But you also got to remember, Evan, Schmid also stayed out on that last caution, so he's on a different strategy from these top 2 drivers up here. So right now he's just playing the waiting game to see what happens, maybe banking on another caution before he has to come back down. And also Jared Turnbull in that same boat, we saw him start second during that restart. So there's a few drivers out here testing the waters of strategy and trying to play it out. But the way these races have been going, and as spread out as these drivers are right now, I know there's a few mid-pack battles going on here. They're going to have to come in at some point.
Just kind of scanning through the top couple of runners here, side-by-side action for 8th position this time before with the 24, and looks like the 91 doing the battle off to quarter number 1, and that fight going to be won that time by Garcia. Garcia very slow though at a turn number 1, and a big charge for Kruska up the inside. So all of that going to continue. Caution to flying though, going to fly. Problems at lap number 22.
And we're going to try to figure it out, but that's exactly what Schmid and Turnbull needed, was that caution to come out here, Evan. It plays right into their hands because they can come down with everybody else, get the fuel, get the tires, and be right out where they are.
And here it's issues with Richard Hines, we believe. Another piece of contact going off to quarter number 1. It'll be coming up on the LSRTV replay in just a moment. Looked like the driver in front of him checked up. That was Brian Barney, who was on the outside of the racetrack and looking to get around any Banfield in a battle for 13th position. Barney didn't want to commit to the outside. Turn 1 is one of, if not the tightest corner for these guys to navigate through, and I don't think Hines was expecting the checkup, tried to avoid him, and came in pretty hot, clipped him in the right rear, and that car went right side first into the outside wall. A pretty good look to the 87. That car came to a stop, and that is what brought out the caution to flying for the second time tonight. Both incidents to this point happening down at that part of the racetrack.
And I do want to give a quick congratulations to that 87 machine, because it's not easy to keep those cars up towards the wall when you're going that fast and you're bouncing off the wall. But he did a phenomenal job keeping it off the wall, and or keeping it on the wall, I should say, and not coming down into other drivers trying to get past. But caution out once again. Tim Doyle is your leader, as him and Joe Branch were battling for the majority of that green flag run. I think they'll come back down pit road this time and get a full service on these cars once again.
And if everybody does agree that pit stops are necessary, as they did on that first stop, then their strategy is going to work out pretty good, because they're going to get themselves back on cycle, and they're also going to be able to gain the track position. So, pit lane open this time at 4. Looks like everybody down. Doyle, Branch, Schmid, Stouffer, Steele, Walters, Turnbull, Kruska, Garcia. Looks like basically everybody in agreement that pit stops are necessary. Didn't see any big shakeups as far as plus and minuses 3 or 4 positions at a time, but a pit lane the last time. We'll see if everybody this time as well can easily and safely navigate the pit lane. Sliding into the boxes, Tim Doyle comes in as your race leader. Car goes up. Looks like they're going to go with fresh tires at a fuel race off for the pit lane. Going to be one handily the driver of that 11 machine. No contest off of pit road. Branch off second. Stouffer, Steele, Walters top 5.
And for our NASCAR fans who are here for the majority of what else we broadcast here on LSRTV, just a quick little note, these cars do have speed limiters and they do set that speed, so it's going to be hard for any of these drivers to beat each other off of pit road. If you got that speed, you can't speed it up and gas it. Of course, you can go without the speed limiter into pit road and try your luck, but it's definitely going to be hard for Joe Branch or Brian Barney, even Christian Steele, who are up there in the top positions in pit stalls and trying to get some ground on Tim Doyle if they're all going down the same speed and entering the same going into pit road.
The pit stops ranged about 8 to 9 seconds total as far as fastest and then slowest time. That's when the car is up on the jack. So really you're going to lose or gain positions on your entry into the box, and you're going to gain or lose positions. It would obviously be a factor depending on what kind of service you want to get when you're on the pit lane, but also maybe a half a second there, a little bit of a slower entries, another second or so, and that's how you end up losing a spot. You're not going to see I think any drivers tonight, or I'll put it this way, you shouldn't see anybody get a speeding penalty, because these cars have the ability with that pit limiter. If you want to try your luck and it doesn't work out for you, that's, you got to reap what you sow. But these cars have the ability to use that pit limiter. I don't see any reason why they would not. So we're going to cycle things back through. Brian Barney in the number 16 machine is going to come across the start-finish line this time to collect lights off on the pace car as your new race leader. Driver who started in 6th position did not come down to the pit lane under this caution flag, so we do have one lone driver decide to stay out. That'll put him up to the front of the field on a little bit of older Firestones.
And, you saw how well it worked out for Jared Turnbow and Nicholas Schmid. So why not give it a chance for that number 16, Brian Barney? Maybe he can have the same luck as those two who were able to gain some track position. But if we look down, Nicholas Schmid all the way back into 15th. So he didn't have the greatest of pit stops coming down pit road, losing a ton of position. But maybe he'll be able to bounce back up and be back in that top 3. But Brian Barney, your leader, and I don't expect to have Tim Doyle wait around too long either. He's going to be looking to that inside very fast along with Joe Branch.
So when the action on the racetrack is green, it is very high intensity, but as we work under our second caution flag tonight, we're going to come to take a green flag with 25 laps complete from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That will mark the quarter distance in tonight's Indianapolis 250, presented by the Drive for Suicide Prevention. So Barney jumps up front behind him. The order remains the same as it was prior to the caution flag. Doyle now running second, followed by Branch, Stouffer, Steele inside of the top 5. 17 cars still scored on the lead lap. Do want to note that we have had a couple of drivers who have gone behind the wall. It looks like Lynn Cancello, along with Cody Eldred, Chad Frankenfield, Andrew Cardinale, Ray Sanders, and Rory Collins. Their machines have gone back to the garage at a gasoline alley. Their nights are going to end premature here tonight from Indianapolis. Pace car back down and away. We await on the green flag to drop this time. That number 16 anticipates and sets sail. Green flag flies. We're quarter distance.
And that 16 got a really good start off of that green flag. He gave a little bit of a distance between him and that 11 of Tim Doyle. So Tim Doyle is going to have some work to do to get back up to that 16 machine, but he's going to be there going down the back straightaway. That draft plays a huge part in these Indy cars, Evan, and you see him closing that gap so quick. He's going to be looking towards the inside, going off into turn 3, wasting little time. That 11 of Tim Doyle is as he resumes the lead coming off, and I assume Joe Branch is going to be doing the same going down turns down the straightaway and into turns 1 and 2.
And talking about these guys breaking off into packs, you have to be so aggressive on these starts because you never want to be the lead driver of a pack unless it's the top 4 as we go side by side for the race lead once again. And Barney going to put it right back to Tim Doyle and take over the race lead once again at a quarter number 1 to the short chute. But basically, you don't want to be in the position that Bradley Walters is in at the moment. You don't want to lead a pack because that means that you have 4 or 5 guys behind you who are going to be all over your gearbox for the next 20 laps until we get a caution flag. If you're at the tail end of a pack, that means that you got 4 or 5 guys in front of you that you can get up on. But I think, for Chris Stouffer, he got a good restart. He's the 4th driver in line in this lead pack. That's fantastic. The difference between 4th and 5th is a 2/10 of a second gap to the race lead compared to a 1.4 second gap to the race lead. Problems though behind. Big wreck at a turn number 4, and it's Jason Burgess and Johnny Thomas.
Yeah, huge wreck coming down the front straightaway as we try to get a replay coming up for you on your screen here, just coming down off of turns 3 and 4 down the front straightaway. We see contact between Jason Burgess, and he's going to come right up off the pit wall into the outside, and Johnny Thomas doesn't even seem to have contact with that 23 machine, but just got into the wall just a little bit, trying to get the car woed down to miss it. That car hit the inside wall pretty hard and came flying back on the track, Evan.
And Kruska's going to have damage. I think it was miscommunication where Kruska was looking to go high on the 23 at a 4. The 23 slid up to protect that top lane, and that little bit of a tap to that right rear quarter panel sent that 23 out of control. A hard hit to the inside. Kruska ended up bouncing off of the outside fence a couple of times, but then as you noted, Burgess, when he came back up, took a good hit from a couple of drivers, and as he was sitting there backwards on the front straightaway, ended up additionally collecting some of those guys who were trying to make their way through. And again, when you're in traffic, you're right up somebody's gearbox, it is a little bit easier to see around these cars than it is, say a NASCAR Cup car, because you've got a little bit bigger field of view. You can kind of look in between the spoiler on these things and the tub of the chassis, the back end of the car. There is some space to look around, but it is still difficult to see what's going on in front of you. If a car gets turned sideways and there's a lot of smoke, you're basically driving blind. That again, you're coming out of the corner, turn 4, you're getting set to come off of 4 wide to commit to try to carry all that speed through the exit of the corner and down the long straightaway, the most opportunistic passing zone on track. And as we've seen, I think in almost every single instance in these accidents we've seen so far tonight, Chris, there's always somebody behind it who can't get out of the way.
Yeah, definitely. We got pit stops happening. There's a few takers and a few people that are staying out. Bradley Walters is going to be the first car to come down pit road with Christian Steele and company behind him. But your leaders, Tim Doyle, Joe Branch, and Brian Barney, are all staying out, which is interesting for that 16 machine because he stayed out under the last caution. You'd think the 16 would come in, get back on a little bit of the same fuel strategy, and come back on and be back towards the back of the field.
And on the instances so far tonight where we've had disagreements on what the strategy has been, it's almost entirely been everybody says, let's come down to the pit lane, and then there's 2 or 3 drivers that decide that they're going to actually decide to stay out, 1 or 2 here and there. But on this one, we had about total 8 drivers decide to stay out. And we had another remaining about 7 or so decide to come down to the pit lane. Also keep in mind that obviously the drivers involved in that accident would be coming down to the pit lane. I think all, if not most of them, were able to drive away for the accident at a quarter number 4 and not have to be forced to take a virtual tow back down to the pit lane. So that does add to the numbers, obviously, if the drivers back down to the pit lane. But I'd say about a third of the active cars on track did decide to come down and pit that time, only about 4 laps after we last saw them down for service.
And with that caution bringing out, Evan, that means we have 16 cars of the 24 that took grid on the lead lap at this time, as we have Jason Burgess, who just got involved in that last one, going down the down on the race laps. He's going to be 17th, taking that car behind the wall. So 16 cars trying to finish it out on lap. We're on lap 30 now, coming to 31. Tim Doyle is your leader. This is the first time that he'll be leading a start in a while.
Yeah, we expect the lights to go out on the pace car this time, and then Tim Doyle going to be able to get set to bring us back to a green flag. First time since earlier on in this event that the lights do go out. So 2.5 miles until we go back into green flag racing conditions. We want to take this opportunity to give a call to Joel Real Timing. Coverage of tonight's Indianapolis 250 is brought to you by Joel Real Timing, the official timing software of LSRTV. Whether you spend your time in the sim, behind the wheel, on the pit box, or from the spotter stand, JRT is your go-to software for iRacing timing and scoring analytics. You can get yourself a basic download or get the pro version today at joel-real-timing.com. Again, the official timing software of the LSRTV. And based on just how these cars pass at Indianapolis, making the move at a turn 4, but almost always often, Chris, not clearing the driver they're trying to get around until right before they dive into the corner. This place has been known to set up for quite the exciting, thrilling finishes, and that timing may come in handy come lap 100.
And speaking of timing, Evan, coming down these long straightaways at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, coming off of turn 2, let's say Joe Branch is trying to set up a pass for Tim Doyle. He's thinking that pass as he's entering turn 1, coming through turn 2, and he's setting it up on the back straightaway for turn 3. So a lot of planning does go in, and timing, like you mentioned, is a great factor here during this race.
It'll be Doyle, Branch, Barney, Stouffer, Garcia inside of the top 5, with Turnbull, Avid, as well with Banfield, Schmieg, and Walters inside of the top 10. Steele, Redding, Kruska, Brizik, Thomas, and Chin. The top 16 drivers still being scored on the lead lap. Pace car down and away, field in the hands of Tim Doyle, who with no hesitation brings us back to green flag from Indianapolis. 31 laps now in the books, and the 11 pulls into 1 and 2. Looks good now, may not look as good at a 2 though.
Yeah, that draft is a huge part here. As we mentioned on the last restart, Joe Branch is already closing that gap to Tim Doyle. Brian Barney, not so lucky this time. He's fallen back into the clutches of Chris Stouffer and that 7 machine. So we'll see if they can catch back up here. As Joe Branch looking to the inside. He's going to clear him going off into turn 3 and take that lead. Going to get that lap led maybe coming off of turn 4. Tim Doyle going to be looking, maybe shading the outside. Going to immediately duck down coming off of 4, taking it side by side, coming to the line that allows Brian Barney, Chris Stouffer to catch back up. It's Tim Doyle takes that lap led going off into turn 1.
The 4-way battle for the race lead as they single file out in the short chute. Keep an eye if we go 2x2 once again down the back straightaway, looking to the inside, and now diving down to the bottom. Branch going to go side by side for the race lead. Behind them, the 7 is Stouffer, looking top side on Brian Barney. 2x2 to quarter number 3. The battle for the race lead continues, and Branch is barely going to get clear. Look at Doyle though, never really transitions to the inside till right there. Dives low at a turn 4, looks to get the draft. He'll go right back down to the inside, and he won't even allow the 28 to lead the lap.
He will not. Tim Doyle striking at the perfect moment to continue those laps led and to get that done. That's exactly what you need to do at the finish of the race. Time that pass just perfectly, and the driver in front may think he has it, but if you get that draft as Joe Branch shows coming down into turns 3 and 4 side by side once again, it's the same song and dance. Evan going to clear him here, and he's going to duck right down in behind Joe Branch and do the same thing once again. So he's got this track figured out. He knows exactly what he has to do to make passes here.
And I was just thinking as far as what options would Tim Doyle have on the restart, because getting a big jump wasn't very much of assistance to him. He was able to enjoy a little bit of clean air to 1 and 2, but as soon as we got to the back straightaway, as expected, Branch was able to get back over him. But again, there's no real way to defend from the race lead. You can't do it. You can block, but chances are in an IndyCar, both of you are going to end up pretty hard into the fencing on either the inside or the outside of the racetrack, which is why so many drivers love to ride second or third late in these races and then make the move on the last corner, maybe the last lap even, so that that person doesn't have an opportunity to get back at you, because Tim Doyle could take a half a second lead off for the restart. He would still get caught and passed. He could restart with those guys right on his gearbox. He could still get caught and get passed. There's no way to get away from that big wake that comes out for the back of your car. Those guys are going to suck up in a draft to the gearbox and get around you, no problem. These things are fantastic in that draft. Just look how easy Branch pulls up at a 2, goes to the inside, and he'll be the race leader in the quarter number 3. But then watch when we come to 4, Doyle going to do the same thing back to him, and the 28 may not even be credited with leading this lap 36.
And if you're looking now with them changing positions so much, Evan, they're allowing these drivers to catch back up. Chris Stouffer, Brian Barney, Anthony Garcia, they've all caught back up. And once you get to a certain point, when you see Tim Doyle always dive down and try to take that spot from Joe Branch as he did coming through turns 1 and 2, add Chris Stouffer into that mix. Just say one time that Tim Doyle is a bit regular and he's just easing on through the track, and then Tim Doyle is on the inside. If you get caught in a rhythm and you're not always watching what you're doing at all times, Evan, it's going to prove a big crash, and especially up here in the lead where you'll take out about 6 cars with a 6-car breakaway right now.
Yeah, and that's in fact the biggest breakaway that we've seen, and it's a large gap. Basically, 3rd through 6th, a little bit more polite. Those are the guys who can lift off of the throttle, save some fuel. Even that noted that when you're 5th or 6th in line, last lap for Jaron Turbo all the way at the back, 257 miles an hour to quarter number 1. The guys up front aren't saving any fuel. The guys a little bit further back have an opportunity to save fuel if they wish. But the gaps between packs have been half a second to a second so far to this point. It's over 3 seconds to the group that is 7th on back. That's David Levine, Bradley Walters, Christian Steele. They are way off of the pack, and it's almost ironically enough because they're fighting with each other more than the lead pack is. Sure, Doyle and Branch are going back and forth, and I don't expect them to end that anytime soon. But as noted, maybe the front 2 are battling, but in this lead pack, the back 4 more or less single file. In that secondary pack, everybody is making a move, and that's costing that group about 3/10 on these leaders every single time around.
And you got to think, Evan, how long are Joe Branch and Tim Doyle going to keep this up? Because as the run goes on, we still got another pit stop or so in this race left where you have to come down and get fuel. You see Chris Stouffer and Brian Barney, they're all sitting back and just watching this battle happen as you see Tim Doyle go down to the inside once again down the front straightaway. So at what point do Joe Branch and Tim Doyle give up, let one lead and save some fuel? Because if you are Joe Branch right now in second, you could honestly just sit back and save fuel and leave Tim Doyle out to dry, and then Tim Doyle will have to figure out another way to save fuel.
If the Alexander Rossi option is always a path that you can take if you want to try to kind of snooker some of these guys into falling into your strategy and playing with it. But Stouffer, Barney, Garcia, Turnbull, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can keep an eye on the intervals up at the top of your screen, but they have more or less been staying put. If Stouffer really wanted to in 3rd, he could follow Doyle up to the inside and challenge with Branch and could force a side-by-side all the way from the short shootout of 1 to turn 2 into the back straightaway, where I think Branch would eventually win it. But the 7, just letting the guys up front fight. I think that, again, he's in a perfectly comfortable position on the racetrack at the moment as these guys up front go side by side. And if you take a look at the stats, Tim Doyle is leading most, if not all, of these laps just because of how this cycle has sorted itself out. With Branch making the move down the back straightaway, but then right there, Doyle being able to make the move back on him at a quarter number 4. So while Stouffer in 3rd, and I think that Tim Doyle probably is going to end up at the end of this race with anywhere from 5 to 10 times more laps led than Joe Branch, but they've both been in the lead position for probably an equal amount of time.
Yeah, Evan, and it's not the amount of laps led, it's that one lap there, that lap 100 coming across that line, and I think Joe Branch knows that. He's just out there having fun. He knows that if he hangs off and if he just makes the move in turn 4, then he'll have that lead, but he's just having fun and messing around with Tim Doyle at this moment. And sure, Chris Stouffer could jump in there, but you also got to be wary of the arrow push with these Indy cars, Evan. You can't just send it off in there and follow a car through. You could push up, hit Joe Branch and cause a major accident. So Chris Stouffer can't really just send it in there and follow the 11 through. There are a lot of things that go through these drivers' head when you're setting up to make a pass here at the Indy Motor Speedway, and that's one of them.
7 laps away from the halfway point in tonight's Indianapolis 250. When we get there, we'll take a quick look at our iRacing Midway race break. But I think that a combination of a couple of factors, one being the fact that we've had some attrition, a handful of accidents, some of them fairly large down in quarter number 1 so far tonight. Have taken a good number of cars out of this race. 15 on the lead lap, one driver a couple of laps down. Michael Chin just now got it behind the wall. So I think 16th through 24th are basically all out of this race behind the wall. The cars may be on the pit lane, but damaged to the point where even if they do decide to go back out, not going to be at a competitive speed and would be more attained to call it quits. But because of that, we've got less drivers, and because there's such a separation between 1 through 6 and 7 through 10 or 11, that we're in a great position right now for this race to go green for a long time, if not all the way through.
Definitely, and that's something these drivers have to start thinking about, because we've been green for a while now, and we've seen Tim Doyle and Joe Branch do the same song and dance for the past couple of laps here now, and they've been able to actually pull away through 4 through 6. So the top 3 now 2 seconds ahead of that pack, and that pack is 2 seconds ahead of the other pack. So everybody's spaced out here. We got a top 3 battle, and Christopher's doing exactly what he needs to be doing at this time. He's just saving fuel, riding out, letting these guys have their fun, and we'll see how much longer these the fun lasts up before they buckle down and try to actually save fuel and get that strategy the way they want it.
You'll know we're getting later in the race when there's less passing happening up front. And again, it sounds counterintuitive, but you can see Tim Doyle make a move for the race lead. That time by dead even between the 11 and the 28. Joe Branch is going to pass Doyle here. So if you're trying to win the race and you're the 28, say this is lap 100. You make a move to the inside right there, you're not going to win the race. You're going to clear him. You're going to lead through 3 and 4. But watch what Tim Doyle is going to do back to you at a turn 4. 11's going to get back to him. He's going to pass him, coming to the start-finish line, and Tim Doyle wins this race. Goes high, ducks to the bottom, gets that draft, and he'll power to the inside this time, and he wins this race if it's lap number 100. So that's why late in this race, you're going to see a lot less passing. You don't want to be the leader. You'll almost have guys lifting on each other, trying to be in second or third. Again, that's why I think Stouffer is in such a good position. I recommend making that move no sooner than corner 3 or 4, because you do not want to give that guy an opportunity to pass you back. Same thing applies if you tune in with us on Friday nights for the Super Speedway Cup Series or any of our NASCAR stuff on the Super Speedways. You don't want to pass a guy and give it an opportunity to pass you back, but these cars draft so much better than the stock cars, it's ridiculous.
It really is ridiculous as we see Tim Doyle doing the same thing again, and you gotta think this is a learning experience for Joe Branch. He's seeing just what that 11 car has coming down that front straightaway, and honestly, it's gonna help him coming to lap 100 heaven, and especially gonna help Christopher because he knows exactly when these drivers are planning to make their moves, so he can plan accordingly and make his own moves and try to stump them all and be there and win the race at the end. So all of these drivers seem to be having a lot of fun right now, but right now they're just taking notes. They're seeing what each driver is doing every time a driver passes another driver, and come towards the end you'll see a lot of that come into factor.
Drivers headed pit side this lap. Brian Barney coming in from 5th position, and it looks like that he may be one of the only drivers coming down, but pit stops in the works for your race leaders. Barney gives up the number 5 spot and comes down to the pit lane all by himself. Very also, much like plate tracks with stock cars, you want to be out there in a group, because believe it or not, you think the conventional wisdom, again, is that if you're battling with somebody, you're side by side and you're passing, you're losing time. Not the case. If you don't have a draft, you're going to be sitting still, which means that every time somebody sucks up to you and passes you, you're going faster than you would be by yourself. So in theory, if you pit by yourself and end up back on track by yourself, you're going to be slower than those who are running in packs of 3 or 4. So we'll see where Barney ends up, but I'm curious if the guys up front are going to be willing to work together enough to the point where they will all pit together, or if maybe they'll try to leave somebody out there, kind of go in lone wolf onto the pit lane and then just kind of take their luck on where they blend back out onto the track with.
It would help all of them out if they came down together, Evan. You know, the only reason I think Brian Barney came down at this moment in time is because he stayed out those past 2 cautions to get that track position, and this run's gone green ever since that. Since I don't know what lap we went green on, but it's been a while since we've went green, and Brian Barney probably just couldn't stay out on fuel anymore. Now he's gonna take 1 lap down, and I haven't seen anybody else come down since.
Yeah, it looks like he may be caught off cycle in this whole thing as we keep an eye to see if anybody else from up at the front of the field is going to decide to duck down at the pit lane. That top group of 6, as you've seen on the wide shots, has slowly started to break apart, and especially because Barney came down and left that secondary group. The lead pack is now basically a 3-horse race. Traffic on the outside, but it is Doyle, Branch, and Stouffer at time at a quarter number 4. Let's take this opportunity past the halfway point to take a look at our iRacing Midway Race Break, brought to you by iRacing, the leading online racing simulation developed from the beginning as a centralized racing and competition service. iRacing organizes, hosts, and officiates races at virtual tracks all around the world. And in the fast-paced world of esports, iRacing is your one-stop shop for online racing with officially sanctioned series by the likes of NASCAR, IndyCar, IMSA, World of Outlaws, and more. Working lap 52, Tim Doyle is your race leader. In the Indianapolis 250 presented by the Drive for Suicide Prevention, Joe Branch right there with him in second, Christopher in third, lead the way and are in the catbird seat at lap number 52. 2.6 seconds back, you'll find Jared Turnbull and Anthony Garcia, who are the lone two-car secondary pack inside of the top 5. Christian Steele is 3.7 seconds off of the race lead all by himself. Then you got to look almost 9 seconds back to find the duo of Nicholas Schmieg and Anthony Banfield, who run 7th and 8th respectively. Jason Brizick all by himself in a number 9 spot and 22 seconds back. And complaining about maybe some front wing damage that has been hindering him tonight is William Kruska, who's in P10.
And 11th. In your last car on the lead lap, we saw him get involved in a little incident, get in the wall earlier. That's the 83 of Johnny Thomas. Then we get down to the people who are either pitting or just off the track at this moment in time. We got the 12th is going to be Brian Barney, who we saw come down pit road. David Levine's going to be 13th. 14th, Michael Redding. 15th, Bradley Walters. Michael Chin is going to be 16th, 9 laps down. 17th, Jason Burgess. Richard Hines going to be 18th. Kevin Finn is going to be 19th. And rounding out your top 20, that's going to be Lynn Kinchelo.
And the rest of these drivers are out of this race from this point. You look at everybody else through on from Kinchelo on. You've got Cody Eldred, who is going to finish, I guess, in 21st position. Chad Frankenfield, 22nd. Andrew Cardinal in 23rd. Ray Sanders in 24th. It was the Cardinal-Sanders accident who wrecked out of this race 43 laps ago that put us under the caution for the first time at lap number 11. So that's your look top to bottom at your iRacing, a midway race break. For more information on the wide variety of sim racing possibilities online, you can go to iRacing.com and sign up today for a limited time. If you go to iRacing.com/World of Outlaws, you can get some exclusive promo codes as we follow race leader Tim Doyle down pit road at lap number 55. If you're looking to sign up for iRacing, this is the place to go. You have two options: a 1-year iRacing membership for over 50% off, or you can get a 3-month membership for less than $5. That is on new iRacing membership only, but if you've been considering getting on the sim, there is no better time to do it than now. Again, that is iRacing.com/World of Outlaws. So Doyle pits from the race lead, crossing over from lap 55 to 56. That car is going to go with fresh tires and fuel. He's out of the box. What does Joe Branch do? He's going to follow him right back down. Stouffer, who was third, assumed second, will now assume the race lead, but watch this 28 down pit road and follow him and Doyle and see where they match up once they both complete and cycle through.
And this is not what I expected, Evan. I expected them to at least work out a little bit of a deal to come down together, but no, they're all coming down alone, playing that lone wolf strategy that you talked about, just trying to see where they size up at the end, which is always a viable strategy, especially here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway where anything can happen. Now, Chris Stouffer, your leader, 9 cars on the lead lap, 9 cars who have yet to pit as he's coming off of 4, and now Chris Stouffer will drop down towards the pit lane, so that's going to drop that 7 car into pit road.
So Stouffer gives up the lead. Now let's see where Branch ends up at a racetrack in relation to Tim Doyle. Full speed in the short shoot is Doyle. Joe Branch is trying to get up to speed. Here they come at turn number 2. Drag race down the back straightaway. More speed in favor of the driver behind Tim Doyle, but the winner in that is going to be Joe Branch. Branch is going to put lapped car Johnny Thomas in between the two of them. And in fact, at the moment, that car is out there for position, but I don't think Thomas has come down to the pit lane so far to this point, so he's going to be a factor in the middle of that. By the way, check out the stars and stripes on the 83 and the helmet behind the wheel of that 83 of Thomas, who is going to end up in between Branch and in between him and Doyle. Now let's see what happens with Stouffer on the inside. Much slower. You see the 7 on the access road. It's going to get passed, looks like, easily by Joe Branch, and it even looks like that Tim Doyle's going to catch up to him. So even on that very slow stop for the 7, because when we saw Joe Branch come down to the pit lane, Chris, Stouffer had stayed out. He was on the gearbox. He was basically even with him. So Stouffer lost a lot of time, and he's still able to come out of pit road in front of the Doyle entry. So looks like either a very poor start for the 11 or a blistering start for the 28, because Joe Branch, once we cycle through this, is going to become our race leader.
And I think it's the latter of the two, because we saw Chris Stouffer come out, and he's right in front of Tim Doyle. So I think that machine of just had a great pit stop as they're going down side by side. Tim Doyle is going to pass Chris Stouffer coming down into the turns 3, and now is going to have his sights set on Joe Branch.
Now the question is Branch far enough ahead to get away from this group? He sits just in front of Doyle and Stouffer. Both of them have been able to get around the lap machine of Johnny Thomas, who falls to what is going to be 6th position in the active running order. But is this going to once again to become a 3-car pack? Remember what we said before pit stops. You need drafting help. Joe Branch, 222 out of the corner. Stouffer and company are going to get up to about 235 by the time to get down to 3. Sure, they're battling side by side for second, but because there's 2 of them and only 1 of Joe Branch, they are going to catch him soon, and we're going to be right back where we were before pit stops at a 3-car battle for what right now is only 3rd position. Still waiting for 2 drivers to complete service. Jason Brizik in this time. Christian Steele stays out and will assume the race lead in this thing. I believe, actually, no, he pitted last time by, scoring just now, updating through. So with Brizik pitting, I believe Joe Branch going to get the race lead next time by, and this cycle of green flag pit stops is going to be complete.
And that was a great call by Joe Branch to pit when he did. He's got a great gap between Tim Doyle and Chris Stouffer right now. I expect them to be here within the next 2 or 3 laps, maybe, even though they are battling side by side. But everything's set to cycle out here, Evan, and that's going to be interesting to see where other drivers cycle out and see if anybody else. And a caution always throws a wrench into things at these races. So a lot of things to pay attention to as we passed our first green flag pit stop of the day.
And there's so many different ways to get into trouble in an Indy car. You can get into trouble with a pack of cars that have made contact with somebody. You can cheat that corner a little bit too tight, get on the curbing, lose control, and get loose and spin up the hill. You can also get tight coming out of turn 1. Coming out of turn 4 and get into the fence and wreck your car. So just because we are spread out doesn't mean that we are immune from having some issues. But I'll tell you what, we are within 40 laps to go from Speedway, and caution flag flies right on that note, and it's problems with Christian Steele, who was leading no more than 3 laps ago.
Yeah, as we try to get the replay up for you. Going down, he's coming off the back straightaway here, is going down into turns 3 and 4, and he's going to get caught by that 38.
Late move.
Yeah, it's a late move. We talked about late moves earlier, and it's just going to send that driver up into the pit, the outside wall, I should say, hard, and going to send him right back down the track. Good job by other drivers to avoid Christian Steele as he was flying down towards the inside of the track.
Well, I said that there were 3 ways to get in trouble. You could get into an accident, you could spin out, or you could pound the wall, and it was option A. A late move to the inside. I don't think Steele was expecting it, and that car, again, just snapped around. At that point, there's absolutely nothing you could expect the 78 to do. Best case scenario, and that was he came to a stop. He didn't continue to roll across the racetrack, and we were able to avoid any other drivers getting collected in that. That's not good news, though, for the Branch, Doyle, and Stouffer trio, because they were 7 seconds in front of the next closest car. That 2-car pack in second and third. It just caught back up to Joe Branch, and we were back where we started in a 3-way battle for the race lead. Now all 12 drivers who are still on the lead lap after the cycle of pit stops are going to be in this race for the end of it. Drivers down at pit road, 37 laps to go. Chris, I still don't think this will be enough fuel to get them all the way, though.
And look who we had stay out at the last second, Evan. Tim Doyle and Chris Stouffer stay out, and they're also going to have Johnny Thomas in the 83 machine stay right behind them as well. Yeah. So a couple guys stay out here. So they're going to be trying to test the waters of the pit window here at Indianapolis, and that's always good to see. And especially when we go back green, you won't see probably as many people lifting off and trying to save fuel. You'll see people trying to get up towards the front now, because you just said we passed the 40 lap to go mark, and you're going to start seeing drivers start working their way up slowly but surely to the front of this field.
The relatively small amount of drivers in the lead lap being at 11 means that if you're at the back of the lead pack, you're still in a position that you could fight for this win. But I think the call has got to be for somebody, probably not Doyle and Stouffer and the likes of, Branch, the guys up front. But if you were running 8th or 9th on the lead lap that sits 11 cars deep, I would come and pit this time by. Come top off. And if you get a caution flag, stay out. Late in these races, cautions breed cautions. You get 2-3 yellows, you should be able to make it if you're saving fuel, depending on what kind of fuel mapping you're going to be using anyhow under the green flag. Top off. And then when these guys come down pit road and pit, they're going to be way behind you, and none of that's going to matter. And what we've seen tonight as well is, sure, these guys like coming down for fresh Firestones as well. But, Chris, in all honesty, for the amount of drivers that we've seen stay out up front, they really haven't looked like they've been at a huge disadvantage. Now, the guys that are fresh tires jumped on them on the start and passed them, but they've been able to get back, use the draft, make those passes back, and be able to contend for the race lead. It might be a little bit harder to drive, but if you're not willing to keep the right foot down and wheel it for a little bit, then you shouldn't even bother racing for the race win. So I don't be surprised if nobody decides to come down and top off. Keep an eye on those guys at the back, though, for saving gas and maybe not wanting to come down pit road for the rest of this race.
And this is also where we start to see drivers start to trim out the cars, Evan, and they try to get as much speed as they can of these cars coming down to the late portions of this race, and just try to test what they can do with these cars and try to make them as good as possible for that last run. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see how these drivers are running now with the stages and the laps coming toward close. So I'm definitely going to have an eye on these drivers that have stayed out.
The lights do go out on top of the iRacing.com official pace car. 65 laps going to be complete next time by, and we will take 35 laps to go from Speedway, Indiana. So it's going to be Doyle, Stouffer, Schmig, Brizik, Kruska. The top 5 drivers decided not to come down to the pit lane, and they're going to assume the top positions. I don't think that they could make it on fuel, Chris. The guys pitting now are so tight as is and would need to save fuel. The caution did come out relatively quickly off of the cycle to pit service, but I still think that extra 4 or 5 laps that you burned off is not going to be good. And if they get a caution, I would expect the top 5 to come down to the pit lane. But hey, I think the saying goes, you got to risk it to get the biscuit. And if you're not willing to gamble, then like I said earlier, if you're not willing to gamble and if you're not willing to get out there, fight and put the elbows up, no point in racing at IndyCar at Indianapolis, because that's what it's going to take. So only time will tell how this is going to work out. But the top 5 not pitting, 6th on back do pit. That's going to be Joe Branch, Jared Turnbull, Anthony Garcia, David Levine, Adam Banfield, Brian Barney, and Johnny Thomas. Those are the 12 drivers who are going to be scored on the lead lap. Could this be if not one of the final times the pace car going to not get a turn number 4, and Tim Doyle is off and away. Green flag flies, 35 laps to go.
Trying to get the best jump he can to get out as far away as he can from the drivers that pit, but it's not going to work. You can still catch from here, and you're going to see Chris Stouffer try to trim down that gap just a bit. He's going to be going down the back straightaway, and this is where you're going to see that 7 machine keep and gain most of his time back as he's going to look towards the inside. We're going to have a lead change going down into turn 3. Chris Stouffer going to take the lead from Tim Doyle, and I want to bring something to your attention. Joe Branch, he was the first car to come down pit road. He sits in that 6th position. That's normally where we start to see cars fall off, and Joe Branch is the lead of that 2nd pack. So Tim Doyle may have played something into his hands that is right, Evan, because you will need yellows to make it from here. You'll have to save a lot of fuel to make it from this point, and if Tim Doyle just comes down, he's not going to drop that far behind because there's only 12 cars on the lead lap. So strategy, definitely a pressing issue at this moment.
And we broke down that earlier, how you would rather be the last car in a group than the first car in a group. If you're the back of 5 cars, then there's 4 drivers in front of you that you can pass. If you're the front of 5 drivers, there's 4 drivers behind who can pass you. And that's the position that Branch is in at the moment. And it had a combination of the fact that Doyle jumped off onto the restart and the fact that maybe a couple of those guys were caught sleeping, as we got 4 sets of side-by-side up front that time to corner number 1. Battles for 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th, all in action But this group, 5th on back, is way too far back. They're catching up to Nicholas Schmig. They might be able to get up to those guys, but I think even they may be out of touch because Doyle and Stouffer battled for the race lead. They are 1 second in front of the 2-car battle between Brizik and Schmig for 3rd and 4th, and are 2.7 seconds in front of that battle, 5th on back.
And Brizik's one of those drivers that we have not talked about a lot during this race here today. All these drivers that are inside the top 10, top 12, we've mentioned quite a bit tonight. Jason Brizik is not one of those people. He started 12th. He's worked his way all the way up to 3rd by staying out on that last caution. So maybe he's trying to play a little bit of strategy and try to see if this can work into his favor. But as you said, the lead drivers have pretty much checked out. And with the battle side by side, 3rd and 4th, I don't think they're going to catch him. And Joe Branch and company are definitely falling back as well.
Well, with Doyle and Stouffer going side by side every lap as we would expect, I thought that maybe if Brizik and Schmid decided to work together, they might be able to do something. But again, the typical way to gain time in an Indy car is to just keep out swapping positions. But did you see Schmid and Brizik that time? The second driver there, the 91, he didn't go to pass the 99. He actually gave him a little bit of a tap, which isn't the best idea. Bump drafting in a car without a rear bumper is not ideal, but you can see that they are definitely trying to make up the gap, but they're only losing time. It's just not working out for them.
Yeah, that is definitely risky to try to tap and try to bump draft, I guess, so to speak, going down through Indianapolis, because these cars are very twitchy. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this broadcast, Evan, you have to keep a cool, calm head to keep these cars as smooth, because just a little bit too much input, you can find yourself hitting that curbing or just not enough, and you can find yourself out on the outside wall. So you're going to have to find that sweet spot going down in the corner, and tapping each other's cars is definitely not the way to do that.
Last lap, 0.5 of a second faster was Tim Doyle and Chris Stouffer. Well, they raced side by side, I might add, compared to Nicholas Schmid and Jason Brizik, who have been trying to catch up in 3rd and 4th. I think that really they need 2 or 3 more cars to be able to do it. They are losing time to Doyle and Stouffer. They're now again 2 seconds back. Joe Branch and Turnbull, Levine, Garcia, and Kruska. That's a 5-car pack that I think may catch Schmid and Brizik, because again, strength in numbers. 5 drivers typically just happens to be faster than 2. So we may end up seeing a 7-car battle for 3rd through 9th on the racetrack, while the top 2 run away into the sunset.
And if you really want to think about it, Evan, we're really watching the battle for the lead back through 5th through 6th and 7th and 8th on back, because those are the drivers that pit in. And as we mentioned earlier, it's the very edge of the pit window, but you get maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 cautions, you can make it. And the drivers in the lead, Nicholas Schmid, Jason Brizik, Tim Doyle, they cannot. They have to come down pit road no matter what. So basically we're seeing the race for the lead 5th on back right now, and it's really shaping up to be a good one. There's drivers making passes all over the place. Nicholas Schmid, Joe Turnbull just passed Joe Branch as they're switching positions now, going down the back straightaway off into turn 3. So that's also something I gotta pay attention to, is the drivers that have stayed out on that last caution.
And I think if we do not see a caution in the final 27 laps of this race, I think that everybody's going to have to pit. I don't think you're going to be able to go the 35 laps, give or take the lap or so of fuel that you use doing 2 pace laps to get to the green flag. I don't think you're going to be able to do that. So the strategy for Doyle and Stouffer is hope that we don't get a caution, because I think then everybody would need to come down to the pit lane. The strategy for Branch and company, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th through 11th and 12th position on the lead lap, is if we get at least a caution, maybe 2, then we'd be able to make it. But I don't think Doyle, Stouffer, Brizik, and Schmid can make it on just 1 or 2 cautions. So a caution kills the top 4. Green flag racing plays right into their hand.
And just now thinking, Evan, I think Tim Doyle and Chris Stouffer are on the best strategy of staying out, because like you mentioned, either way, those drivers are going to have to come down pit road. And even if they do get a caution and those drivers come out, tires are really, really important here in the IndyCar and at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, because you can wear the tires so much here. So tires are also going to be very important for these drivers. So I really think Chris Stouffer and Tim Doyle have maybe pulled out the correct strategy.
fact, more side by side for the race lead, but that secondary and tertiary pack have now become one. Third through the number 9 position, all battling in one big pack. 25 laps to go. That time by still side by side for the race lead, advantage to the inside. Tim Doyle by 3/100ths of a second. We're going to take this quick opportunity to step aside, and we'll go LSRTV non-stop so you don't miss a moment of the action. Closing in on 20 laps to go. You're watching LSRTV's coverage of the Indianapolis 250, presented by the Drive for Suicide Prevention. Right back to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in a moment. Welcome back to the corner of 16th Street in Georgetown, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Less than 20 laps to go in the Indianapolis 250, presented with the Drive for Suicide Prevention. Happy that you're hanging tight on LSR TV. Battle for the race lead continues amongst Tim Doyle and Chris Gopher, but as noted, these drivers got the top position via staying out. As we stepped aside, we saw one of the other drivers, Chris, who stayed out with them, come down to the pit lane and get fuel. That would tell me that Doyle and Stouffer are going to need fuel too. And it's a waiting game if they can get a yellow before they run dry. 18 to go.
And we've actually seen two drivers step down pit road. We've seen Brian Barney, Nicholas Schmeek. Both of those drivers who had stayed out are now down pit road, so they're good to go to the end. All these other drivers are not, because as we mentioned before...
And they lost a lap, by the way. They're 11th and 12th now, so that strategy gamble almost took them out of it.
It almost did, Evan, and you're absolutely right, but it's kind of working into their favor because now these drivers do have to come down pit road because we are past now the 20 lap to go mark. Time's winding down, and if you want to have a chance to make that pit stop and catch back up, the time's got to be now, because if you're pitting by yourself, you're not going to have that draft help, and if you do get lucky enough to get a few cars to go around you and pit with you, Evan, it's still going to take a while to get back up to those lead cars, so we're going to start seeing few drivers duck back down here in the next few laps.
And I look at it like this: if you're Doyle and Sofer, you pit, you lose the race. But again, you have to keep in mind that we assume, based on just how tight the call was, that the guys who stayed out had no chance. But how about Joe Branch and Jared Turnbull in third, fourth, and Brizik and Levine? If they also can't make it and then everybody pits, then Schmieg and Barney might be onto something, because they would have pitted, gotten to fresh tires before everybody else. The question is the unknown amount of fuel, and nobody's going to be sharing with each other how much fuel they have, so us listening in on the radio for any hints isn't going to do us much good. It's a waiting game. 16 laps to go this next time by. Still the 11 and the 7 comfortably 4 seconds in the race lead over in front of that battle for third, but I know at least the 11 and the 7 are going to have to be pitting because, as you noted, out of the 4 drivers who stayed out, the other 2 have pitted besides these guys.
And waiting's always the difficult part, is it not, Evan? Especially with strategy as close as it is here tonight. Tim Doyle once again making that pass, and you got to think there's another driver that's also been added into this mix. There are 3 cars 1 lap down. William Kruska is one of them. He's sitting in 12th, and he's right behind Brian Barney. So there are 3 drivers who can actually make it to the end of this race, and about 9 drivers who can't. So we're obviously going to have to wait and see who the first driver to throw in the towel and be like, I want to at least finish this race and come down pit road. And right now, nobody's budging. And it's honestly baffling to me that nobody's really budged, because we're crossing now 15 laps to go next time, or this time by, I should say. So it's getting to crunch time, Evan.
And I think the idea for everybody here is, I don't think that they see the benefit in doing what Schmieg and Barney did and pitting soon. I think if you were going to stay out and know that you were going to be short on fuel, then the only reason you would do that is if you would be willing to run until you've got half a lap of gas left and then come down pit road, because you're not going to make it around the next time. There you go to the inside. Tim Doyle's going to give it up, though. The 11 down a pit road from the number 2 position. Not enough gas to make it to the end. Stouffer taking 14 laps to go. He's next, I assume.
And Stouffer's, if he's a lone wolf right now, and with all those people behind him with the draft, and you mentioned that people with the draft are able to save a little bit more fuel, but maybe just not enough more than Joe Branch, who's leading that pack, as we see Jason Brizik hopping to the inside now in between him. But Chris Stouffer out there all by himself has got to come down at some point, as he's coming through the corners to do so at this time. Is he gonna drop down? And he does. That 7 machine's gonna bring it down pit road this time. He's gonna forfeit the lead, and now it's definitely gonna be on the hands of Tim Doyle and Chris Stouffer to make up a whole lot of time on this pack.
So they pitted. We knew that was going to have to happen. We said that if this race goes green, they have absolutely no chance of being able to make it to the end. Now, can you go 35 and a half laps on gas? That's what we're going to have to find out. If somebody has been able to conserve that much fuel under all green flag conditions to be able to make it, or are these drivers also going to have to pit, and then they will join Stouffer, Doyle, along with Schmieg and Barney, 1 lap down, Kruska in that mix as well. Johnny Thomas may end up in that group also. And are they all going to have to come down and pit? So we thought was going to happen has happened. The drivers who stayed out, they took a gamble. It appears at this moment it did not work out. There are now still 7 drivers within 6 seconds of each other who have a shot at this thing. But it's Brizik, Branch, Turnbull, Levine, and Banfield. Really a group of 3 and then a group of 2 of the drivers who we still await word on. If you can make it on gas, it's a 3-way battle for the race lead between the 91, the 28, and the 30.
Yeah, Evan, and you got to think if these drivers cannot make it on fuel, the driver that is in the perfect position to capitalize on this strategy is Nicholas Schmid, because he's just hanging off right back there behind Turnbull and coming down the back straightaway. So he's right up there with the leaders, and he's also saving gas because he is behind those cars. The draft is able to pull him through just a little bit more, and he's able to save just a little bit more gas. So right now, that 99 of Nicholas Schmid is looking pretty good to win this race.
I think the biggest thing is he's drafted off of those guys, so if they were to have to come down and pit, assuming everybody on the lead lap would have to come down and pit, he's running faster than Barney and Kruska are and would be the driver who would inherit the race lead. Problem is, if the guys in front of him pit, he loses his drafting help, and we get a scenario like we saw after green flag pit stops with Joe Branch, where Branch was in the race lead, but there were two drivers behind him and they caught up to him. But I think that Schmid is at a pretty good spot, but again, that all depends on if these drivers need to come down to pit road and get fuel. If they do not, none of that really matters. I want to give you an update on the drivers who came down to the pit lane, though. Tim Doyle and Chris Stouffer were racing for the lead in this thing and pitted. They were so fast to the pit lane, Chris, that they didn't even lose the lead lap. So they have fallen to 7th and 8th on the racetrack, which means that Schmid isn't looking actually all that pretty. 7th and 8th, 28 seconds off for the race lead, is going to be the battle for the race win if the top 6 can't make it on gas.
And that's amazing to me, Evan, have that fast of a pit stop to not even lose a lap. So that's something I didn't even notice. So right now, Schmid is pretty much out of it right now. We're looking at the battle of the lead between Chris Stouffer and Tim Doyle as Stouffer completed the pass going through 3 and 4. So now it's just a waiting game, speculating if these drivers of Brizik, Branch, Turnbull, Banfield, if they all come down pit road, that's going to change everything. And it's starting to happen now. And I think we're inside 10 laps to go. Pit stops
right here. Race leaders pitting.
Jason
8 laps
Brizik
to go, and Brizik's in from the top spot. Branch, Turnbull, looks like Banfield, they're going to stay out, but Brizik says he can't make it, and he's in.
Brizik hard in the wall coming down pit road too. He locked the tires up and smacked the pit wall on the outside. So
I don't think he can
that's
get that
going to
right
be it. I don't think he can get that damage fixed. He smacked that wall pretty hard, got a little bit too hot coming down into pit road. So definitely unfortunate for him, but he's the first driver to call it quits. But we're inside 10 laps to go, Evan. If these drivers are going to pit, they have to do it now.
Side by side lap traffic on the inside of your race leaders, a little bit tight. Turnbull is going to come down pit road from second. So Joe Branch, days out, has gone to the race lead, and he is basically the only driver left. Nicholas Schmid has just gotten his lap back, so if there were to be a late race caution, he could get back into this thing. But by the iRacing rules and by IndyCar rules, the caution inside of 4 or maybe 3 laps to go or less would end this race. There are no overtime in IndyCar, so if we're under the caution at lap number 100, that's how she's going to end. So if those guys were going to get a yellow, they would need it now. Joe Branch, though, over the radio, says that he cannot make it. We guessed that the fuel window was about 30 laps, and we thought that 35 would be a stretch with about 5 laps to go. Branch is out of gas, and he is down pit road. Andy Banfield is pitting from the number 2 position, so that machine cannot make it on gas either, which means that I think David Levine is going to assume the top spot in this race.
He will, Evan. He still has not pit, and he's not coming down pit road this time, so that's going to move that 3 car up into the lead position. He's got a pretty nice gap over Chris Stouffer and Tim Doyle, so we'll have to see. I'm not really quite sure if that 3 car had made a pit stop. He's way down on the RPMs. He's way off pace. Maybe he's just trying to save that fuel and make it to the end, which is a good strategy. But if you get Tim Doyle and Chris Stouffer rapidly approaching, you're going to have to switch that fuel map and get going.
Yeah, kind of like we saw over the weekend in the Coke 600, you can save gas, but you're going to have to go. And I think if Levine's going to be able to make it on gas, he's going to get passed either way, because here comes the battle between Tim Doyle and Chris Stouffer, who decided to pit first. We're nowhere near the strategy and knew that they would have to get a yellow to be able to make it to the end on fuel. But they pitted, and luckily enough for them, everybody else had to also. So not stretching the fuel and coming down once you've realized what the case was going to be plays big dividends, because a pass for the race lead that time at quarter number 2. Tim Doyle is going to go to the race lead with 6 laps to go, and Stouffer in second. Caution flag flies moments after a pass for the race lead, the yellow flag.
And that's going to do it, Evan. We're inside 5 laps to go. That's going to win the race for Tim Doyle, it looks like, as he was able to make that pass. And I guess some sort of traffic got in the way for Chris Stouffer. He couldn't really make the move he wanted to because they were trying to get around Dave Levine. So Tim Doyle is going to come home your Indy 250 winner.
Contacts down in 1 and 2, about the third time we've seen that tonight, side by side between Andy Banfield and William Kruska, or rather up on the inside of it was Brian Barney, and overdrove it a little bit into the corner. The 16 pushed up the hill. Those guys got together, and once those wheels touched, Banfield went up the hill, and that driver did spin around. The caution flag came out. Talk about a heartbreak, though, if you're Levine, because you had just gotten passed by Doyle and by Stouffer, and no more than 5 seconds later, the caution flag comes out. So if Levine's able to limp that car home, he is going to be left thinking, what if, man? If that caution came out 7 seconds sooner, he would be scored as your race leader. But Tim Doyle is going to go to the point. Now, there is an off shot that this race does go back under green flag conditions. I noted that typically we say inside of 5 laps to go is the point of no return, but very consciously I said it's either going to be 4 or 3 laps to go, because the caution flag cycles in these Indy cars is a lot less. Because that there is a one driver, Johnny Thomas, the 83 machine, who is 1 lap down. That means that the cycle of caution flag is going to be extended by 1 lap, because pit lane's going to have to open 1 lap later for the lap cars to come down to pit road. So we take a look at the pace car. Lights are still on. If the lights go out the next time by, we will have a 1-lap shootout from Indianapolis to determine the winner in the Indianapolis 250. If the lights stay on top of the pace car, Tim Doyle will pace to a checkered flag.
And if you're Tim Doyle, you've got to be sitting in that seat, just your mind's racing right now, Evan. You don't know what to think. You gotta prepare to go back green. That's always what you gotta do as a driver. You can't sit back and relax and think you've got it, because next thing you know, you'll cross that line, the pace lights will go off, and you'll have to get ready to go green and defend for 1 lap. And that's going to probably be the craziest lap of Tim Doyle's career, maybe, because he's got to be able to move, block defensively all the way down these back straightaways, into the corners, and even down the straightaway. So it's going to be no give. It's all going to be take if this race goes back green.
And by the way, limping to his stall on fumes is David Levine. And I believe he's going to be able to get into the box, get fuel, and get back out there. And he should be able to stay on the lead lap. He will fall to 10th position, but would still, in theory, be in this thing, have the freshest tires, and have an off shot at giving these guys some, if this race does happen to go back into green flag racing conditions. So is it going to end under yellow, or are we going to get a 1-lap shootout from the Brickyard to determine the winner of this 2017 Indy 250? We're going to find out this time at a quarter number 4, and it is a long and nerve-wracking trip down to the scoring pylon, into the yard of bricks across from the pagoda, to find out, as we take 2 laps to go in this race, do we get 1 lap until a restart? All eyes are on the iRacing.com official pace car. Verdict on this race is going to come this time by. The lights are out. We have a 1-lap shootout coming up from Indianapolis.
And I am on the edge of my seat right now, and we haven't even seen green flag racing yet, Evan. Look who is in your top 3. It's your big 3 we've seen all night tonight, Evan. Tim Doyle, Chris Stouffer, and Joe Branson. That's not going to say that Jason Brizik or Jared Turnbull can't get up there, but it's going to be interesting to see how they maneuver this, because nobody's going to lift going through these corners. They're all going to be trying to get that checkered flag, and we're in for a wild ride.
And if you're on the lead lap, you've got a shot at this thing. These cars get up to speed nice and quick, but we saw 3 wide for the race lead on the opening lap of this race. Nobody's going to lift. This is going to be the craziest 2.5 miles of racing you've ever seen in an Indy car as long as we get to the line. Doesn't matter how much carbon fiber we wad up. It's the first driver to the checkered flag to get the win in this thing. But you need a clean restart, and it is a long stretch from out of quarter number 4 where the pace car dives down to the yard of bricks where you'll collect the white flag. That a lot could go wrong in that distance.
It really can, and as I mentioned, Tim Doyle's mind's got to be racing, but for right now, at this moment, he's got to put all those thoughts in the back of his head and just drive the car as hard as you have all race, and try to keep it smooth, because I feel like we're going to see somebody maybe clip that curb because they're going to try just to get a little bit too much as we're coming to the green flag here for the final time.
Driver's going to ride the wall because you can't pass on the inside off of the restart, so they're going to protect the outside of the racetrack. One more time tonight from Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Tim Doyle going to take the final 2.5 miles from the front of the field. Can he hang on? Green flag.
And you see that driver drop all the way down to the bottom side of the track, playing that defensive line. He's got a great jump going off into turn 1, but we see how fast that gap closes. Joe Branch, Chris Stouffer are going to have one shot. Chris Stouffer have to battle off Joe Branch. Joe Branch is going to get that position. Tim Doyle's got to be loving that. He's not going to get there going into turn 3. Maybe he will. He's got one shot to make this pass, and it's not going to get there this time, but we still got the straightaway.
Side by side for a second. Here comes Joe Branch on the outside of the racetrack. Doyle gonna hold the bottom. It's a 4-car race for the win from Indianapolis. Trying to split the gap. Going all the way to the inside of the racetrack is Chris Stouffer. All of them gonna come up short and hanging on as they wreck. Tim Doyle miraculously survives and wins the Indianapolis 250.
And what a drive that driver in that 11 machine did, and props to the 28 of Joe Branch. He gave it all he got and even wrecked coming down to the start finish line to finish second. Chris Stouffer finished third, ramping over Joe Branch's car. Jason Bridges at fourth, and Jared Turnbull will round out your top 5.
And I'll tell you what, coming to that white flag, I spent a lot of time on that 2-minute pace lap thinking about possible scenarios, and I thought, okay, you know, Doyle might get passed on the restart, but he might be able to pass him back at a quarter number 4. You know, if he's able to hang on long enough that somebody's going to pass him at a turn 4. No scenario in my mind had that 11 machine not getting passed at some point. And in a perfect position was Joe Branch at a 4, but Branch went to the inside, and as soon as he took his focus away from the 11 and started blocking the 7, that was it. That battle for second won the 11 this race.
And I mentioned it earlier in the broadcast, Evan, once you add a third car in that mix, because we saw Tim Doyle and Joe Branch trade positions lap after lap after lap, but once you add a third car, you can pretty much kiss that race goodbye. It throws a wrench into anything, and that's what happened for that 11 machine of Tim Doyle. He was able to just drive away, and he almost lost it coming across down towards the start-finish line as Chris Stouffer was beaten all over that gearbox and trying to get any room to make a pass for that lead, but Tim Doyle comes home your winner.
An absolutely spectacular crash coming across the start-finish line for the drivers behind your race leader. Tim Doyle doesn't care about any of that. It was a show, the 28 machine flipping up in the air. But your winner tonight, Tim Doyle. That late race restart did not take it away from him. He is your winner in the 2017 Indianapolis 250, presented by the Drive for Suicide Prevention. And we'll take this quick opportunity to step aside one final time. We will be right back to Speedway, Indiana for post-race tonight from the action. You're watching LSRTV's coverage of the Indianapolis 250, presented by the Drive for Suicide Prevention. Post-race on the other side. We'll be right back to the Brickyard.
iRacing, you wanted the best, you got them 4 abreast. Often imitated, never duplicated. The greatest show on dirt, the World of Outlaws.
Welcome back live to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, where Tim Doyle is your winner in tonight's Indianapolis 250, presented by the Drive for Suicide Prevention, in a fantastic finish to the tune of 3/100ths of a second. He takes the checkered flag on a 2.5-mile, one-lap shootout at the end. Joe Branch comes home in second. Christopher comes home in third, and trying to catch a word with those finishers in just a second. In the meantime, though, let's take a look top to bottom at tonight's LSRTV full race results. 10 drivers finish on the lead lap, and they include the following: Doyle, Branch, and Stouffer, as noted. 1, 2, 3 will be trackside with us in just a minute. Not all that far out of that fight was Jason Brizik, who comes home with a 4th spot, just 1/10 off of a checkered flag. Jason Turnbull comes home with it a second to come home in P5 tonight. Nicholas Schmieg and Anthony Garcia come home 6 and 7. David Levine with an 8th place result tonight. We got Brian Barney, who comes home at a number 9 position, and followed by William Kruska, final driver on the lead lap to round 3 your top 10.
And now we get to the long list of drivers who were not able to finish on the lead lap. Johnny Thomas gonna finish 11th. Andy Banfield 12th. 13th gonna belong to that 78 machine of Christian Steele. Michael Redding 14th. 15th Bradley Walters. Michael Chin's gonna be 16th. 17th Jason Burgers. Richard Hines 18th. 19th it's Kevin Finn. And rounding out your top 20 and 80 laps down is Lynn Kichelo.
And in the final couple of cars who again were at this thing, Cody Eldred in 21st, Chad Frankenfield to 22nd, Andrew Cardinal 23rd, and Ray Sanders in 24th position. That is a look top to bottom at your LSRTV full race results. Now, though, trackside with the driver of the number 11 in the infamous Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Victory Lane, Tim Doyle is your race winner tonight in the Indianapolis 250. Tim, congratulations on that finish. First off, though, you get a late race caution. It's rated about 4 laps to go, and I'm sure the immediate thought that goes through your head is, I may have just won this thing. And the first thought that went into everybody else's head is, it's probably going to end under caution. Wasn't to be, though. Lights go off on the pace car. What were you thinking going into that one-lap shootout, having been, maybe if the caution came out 20 seconds later, that close from being able to just coast to the win? They made you earn it, though, on that final lap.
Yeah, that caution definitely changed everything. I wasn't expecting that. It totally changed the strategy. I was preparing what I was going to do with Chris leading up to that. He switched it up on me, so I was thinking, okay, I've been getting a run off of him on turn 4, beating him to the line every lap. So I was like, okay, this is going to work. And then that yellow comes out, and then I'm a sitting duck, and I have 2, 3, 4 people, ready to pounce on me. So I just hope to get a good start, get a little bit of a gap, and then going into 3, I was able to protect the low line, and then I had my teammate Joe behind me, and both of them, it just worked out where I had just enough of a gap to beat him to the line.
This entire race, though, had a lot in it. We had green flag pit stops. We had accidents that cut run short. And at the end, especially because doesn't matter if you were in the group of drivers who had stayed out. I don't know if it would be in the second to last yellow. If you stayed out or if you pitted, it mixed up track position. But at the end of the day, everybody had to come back down to the pit lane. How did you guys kind of map out the strategy in this one? You started in the top 5 and you get the win. Joe Branch, you started on pole, was right there with you. Christopher was a top 5 starter. He was there. But in that battle for the race lead at the end was a guy like Jason Brizik, who had to come from the back to get up there. He started 12th, came home 4th. Turnbull started 13th and came home in 5th. What were you able to do, and how were you able to start up front but then keep that car up front through what was a lot going on tonight?
Yeah, it was a surprisingly good field for, a mix of people that don't normally do this all the time. We have guys like me, Joe, Chris, Jason that raced the IndyCar quite a bit, and then the other guys that you don't ever see. But it, caution-wise and stuff like that, it was really a good race. The quality was good. The racing was good. Joe and I have a really good car, so we knew, going into the race, we would be pretty strong. Christian had a good car, but unfortunately he dropped out. And then the couple of times there, we had to change up our strategy, and then Joe pitted, and I was like, well, I didn't want to pit there because I knew even if you stopped on the green, the gap you get on the restart wouldn't make up for it. So I went with that strategy, and Chris stayed with me. So luckily I had a nice partner to draft with, and then Joe hooked up with Jason, and Jason was surprisingly strong there and was able to help him. But in the end, our strategy was better than Joe's, so it would have worked out that way too.
I know that, winning these special events is always an exciting one, and we were happy to be a part of this one because it was a thrilling finish, to say the least. And we mentioned a couple of times that I love racing these Indy cars. I love watching these Indy cars, and the show that you guys put on tonight, I think, validates that point that we had been talking about topside. For you, though, what does it mean to get this kind of a win? And we'll let you take off, but also on that note, after the sponsors and the shout-outs, anybody you want to say hi to?
Yeah, thanks. It's a race for a good cause. It's not something that I was expecting, and then I saw it, and I was like, well, that would be a good race, since the Indy 500 didn't go well for me. So I want to thank Niles Anders, who builds the cars. He built a really strong car. Thank my sponsors, Arizona Sports Shirts, GottaRace.com, Forum.net. And Joe, we worked well together the whole race until we got separated. Want to thank William for putting on the race, LSRTV for broadcasting it, Drive for Suicide Prevention. It was a great race.
It was fantastic, and you were a big part of that by giving us that exciting finish. So, Tim, thank you for that. Congratulations on the win. And as well, thanks for taking a moment of your time to come and chat with us. Best of luck down the road. Hopefully, maybe we'll catch you back here again sometime in the future.
Thanks, guys.
That is your race winner tonight. Your Indianapolis 250 champion is Tim Doyle, taking it to the tune of 37 1/1000ths of a second. Pole sitter Joe Branch, who was dominant for the majority of the night, he comes home second. And Chris Stouffer, who hung around for the bulk of this race, comes home in third. Both of those drivers are trackside, with Chris Murdoch beginning, though, with the driver of the 28.
Standing right down here with Joe Branch. Joe, you had a phenomenal race out here tonight. You started on the pole, came home in second, which you cannot be disappointed with. How was the race out there, and how was the car tonight?
My car was great. I trimmed a lot early on and then brought it back and trimmed it back off. I was all over the place every time I pitted, but car felt good. I guess I made a bad call on pit strategy there at the end, but I just thought if we had a couple more cautions, I wouldn't need to pit again, but we went all the way to the end almost till the yellow came out.
Yeah, and you were able to keep that car up towards the front most of this race, and we saw you and Tim coming battling throughout the majority, just switching off positions, drafting off each other. One thing I do want to mention up is that dreaded last caution that came out. That one caution when we were all sitting up here in the booth and we were waiting to see if the lights went off. What was going through your mind through that entire time when the lights went off on the pace car and you knew you had one lap to try to get it done?
Don't lift. That's all I was thinking. I think I may have feathered it through 3. I had a great run on the last lap and feathered it just a bit. Tim cut in front of me, and I think that was the difference at the line.
Well, either way, it was an amazing finish for a great cause. Before we let you go here, we wanted to give you the opportunity to give sponsors shout-outs. Who makes that happen for you, Joe?
A couple different sponsors. Apex Infotech is a sponsor of mine, sponsor of my series that's broadcast on RaceSpot. I always like seeing RaceSpot or you guys on a broadcast. You always are the best. So that's about it, though. I appreciate it.
Well, we thank you for taking the time to come up here and talk with us, Joe. Congratulations on your second place finish.
Thank you. Thank you, William, for the host, too. That was fun.
And there you guys have it. Joe Branch comes home second, just comes up a little bit short here. Now I'm going to move over, talk to Chris Stouffer, who finished third. Chris, you started fifth. You came home 2 positions up in third. How was the race out there tonight for you?
That was a lot of fun out there. I really bided my time at the beginning and kind of took it easy. And then later on in the race, me and sorry, I'm having a little brain fart. Me and Tim ran off and really had a lock on the field. And then that last caution came out and bunched us all up there for the end.
Yeah, and you guys were pretty set for when you came down pit road, because you knew all the other drivers had to come down pit road, and you guys had a pretty nice gap, and you guys were together. What was it like when you saw that caution came out, and what was it like to see that the lights go off and knew that you had one more lap to go sitting in that second place position?
Well, I tell you, I would have liked to finish under green there and not have that caution come out, but it did. It's part of racing. And then after it was all bunched up, I was just hoping to get a good run and maintain second. Joe got under me into 2. And then down the front stretch, I thought I had a little bit of room there and just wanted to make sure I got third and moved up and hit Joe right there at the line.
Yeah, and just touching on strategy a little bit, we heard Tim talk about it earlier, and you guys were together for the majority of that last stint. What was it like working out the strategy, and did you want to come in with somebody, or did you want to come in by yourself? Obviously, draft is always a big part of Indianapolis. What was the strategy calls like out there for you tonight?
Well, on that last stop, I just I had no idea when Tim was going to come in, but of course I knew he was about to because we're running out of gas. So as soon as I saw him go in, I knew I was going to go in the next lap to try to stay with him so we could come back out and keep swap drafting like that.
Well, you had an amazing race and an amazing finish here tonight at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Before you let you go, Chris, sponsors, shout-outs, who makes it happen for that 7 machine?
Well, really, I do it all myself, but I do want to thank William for hosting the session there, and I will give a shout out to my team that I raced 500 with, yeah, thank you.
All right, and there you have it, guys. That's Chris Stouffer. Chris, congratulations on your 3rd place finish and a strong run tonight here at Indianapolis.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, Evan, and as we're bringing this to a close, we saw a lot of things happen here tonight, from strategy calls to a wild finish that none of us really expected up here in the booth. Indianapolis always produces that kind of great racing, and I was excited to call it with you and be a part of this amazing cause that we were doing this for.
Tell you what, Indy Cars A and then B Indianapolis Motor Speedway are just so much fun, and if you didn't enjoy that one, I'm not sure what kind of motorsport is going to entertain you. That one lap shootout at the end was just a little bit of bonus. We had side-by-side racing. We had big junk. We had 3 wide for the race lead. We had pit strategy into it. Guys running out of gas and coasting to the box, and it was all topped off by a 4-driver photo finish at the end of this thing, almost 4 wide. As it came to the start-finish line, Tim Doyle getting the win by 37 1/1000ths of a second over Joe Branch, who comes home second, Chris Stouffer, who comes home in third, and Jason Brizick in fourth. Those 4 drivers neck and neck to the start-finish line. If you've got Indy cars and you want to race them, give us a call. But it was so much fun tonight in these Indy cars, and as noted, they have to be one of my favorite cars on the sim. And a big thanks as well, Chris, for everybody at the Drive for Suicide Prevention, William, for putting this event together, and all of the people that help him out. It's always fun when these guys hop at LSRTV. We were happy to see them again this time. We look forward to seeing them again down the road, but it was just a fun night.
It really was, Evan, and as you saw or heard Tim mention, a lot of these drivers who don't do it a lot, who came together to run this race just because they saw it was a good cause, and that's always great for the iRacing community to do, to build up this race and produce a fantastic race, in my opinion, Evan. All these drivers proved to be great in the IndyCar here at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and like you mentioned, those are always two great combos, so definitely a great race all around.
And we hope that if you maybe just happen to find us tonight, we hope that you stick around for quite some time. LSRTV's got a couple of things coming up through the rest of the week. We do have tomorrow night off, but look forward to seeing you on Friday night for the Super Speedway Cup Series and this Saturday night for the United Sim Racing Truck Series. Both of those series are in the midst of a championship battle. You do not want to miss those. You can find a full look at our extended broadcast schedule and information to get yourself on LSRTV and your event broadcasted on our website at livesimracing.com. If you want to make sure you don't miss any time we end up live at the air, make sure that you keep up to date with us on the social medias. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at LSRTV, and you give us a like on Facebook at facebook.com/LSRTV official. On that note, though, and until next time, on behalf of the entire team that powers Live Sim Racing LLC, for the folks behind the scenes, and for the broadcast crew tonight, for our producer Cisco Scaramuza, for Chris Murdoch, and for myself, Evan Pasoko, I want to thank you for tuning in and congratulate Tim Doyle. He is the Indianapolis 250 champion, presented by the Drive for Suicide Prevention. We look forward to seeing you next time right here on LSRTV, the voice of sim racing. Until then, good night.